We're in Psalm 60, if you want to make your way over there. Psalm 60, and very practical psalm here on life's battles. That's what we're going to be looking at, life's battles. And I don't know why, I was looking for a battle scene, and these guys came up. So I think it's a video game or something. But really, the way I found this laid out is how to meet bad news and how to find help in God. How to meet bad news, because we all meet bad news in our lives, probably daily, and then how to find help in God. Again, it's David writing and just really honest and serious with us on what's going on in his life. And it's a real life battle here in the Old Testament. But again, we deal with our real life spiritual battles and other battles in our lives. But about the time one problem is solved, oftentimes another one just begins. Have you ever had a day like that, week like that, life like that maybe? Have you ever asked yourself, can things get any worse, right? We've all done that before. Can things get any worse? If you've ever said that before, this psalm's for you. If you're going through that right now, this psalm is for you. David lost some battles, but he won the war. He was leading one battle and praying about another one right behind it. And do you know it is or will be the same with you and I as we struggle through these different battles of our life? See, much of the Old Testament was a shadow of spiritual reality. Things that take place in the physical world of Israel back in the Old Testament were spiritual parables or representations of spiritual realities with God. Paul lets us know in 1 Corinthians 10, I forget what verse it's in, but kind of in that first part there, that basically these things, all the Old Testament scriptures, took place for our example. And so we're to glean and learn these things from these stories and from these characters in Scripture and what they went through in their lives. So either we wouldn't repeat it if it was sin, or if we would repeat it if it wasn't sin, as falling in love with the Lord. Our backstory for Psalm 60 is in 2 Samuel chapter 8. It had to do with King David's conquests. And so he is king at this time that he's writing this psalm. And David is going to defeat Edom and Moab and Ammon and Philistia and Amalek and Hadarezer and so many different peoples in that one chapter. And so just to kind of figure out where we're at in David's life, again, in 2 Samuel chapter 5, in that chapter, he's anointed king. In chapter 6, he moves the ark to Jerusalem. And so we got kind of the political side of it, and we got the religious side of it, of what's happening there in Israel. And then in chapter 7, David already received his unconditional covenant from God. There's a number of covenants that God makes with different people, with Abraham, with Noah. This is known as the Davidic covenant. So it's a covenant with David. But sometimes it was on you and sometimes it was on God. This one was on God. And so that's why it's not a conditioned covenant. This is unconditional, where he lets David know. His promise to David was that you would have an unending royal lineage. And that's why we talk about Jesus being the son of David. It's his lineage passed on all the way through the Christ. And so that happened in chapter 7. And then chapter 8 is a chapter full of battles. So he's king. He's already got the promise from God. He's got a lot of things together. He's got the ark, the covenant finally to its new home in Jerusalem there. And so many things. Awesome, going great. And we hit chapter 8. And it's life's battles. How to meet bad news. How to find help in God. And so we'll deal with the first one, how to meet bad news. And I'll read our first 3 verses and intro. Did I put intro on? Yes. To the choir master, according to Shushan Edith. That simply means lily of the testimony, which I don't know if that gives you any more information or not, but there you go. It's a miktam, which is a liturgical, musical term that's placed in there of David. So we know David wrote it. It's for instruction. So we want to learn about God, learn about Yahweh here. For instruction, when he strove with Aram Naharim and with Aram Zobah, When you hear Aram, that's Syria, what we know today as Syria. And so it's these two kings that he's fighting up in the Syria area that's come down into Israel and is fighting him. So that's what's going on. And when Joab, which is David's right-hand guy, on his return struck down 12,000 of Edom in the Valley of Salt. So that's way down south, and I'll show you a map in a little bit, way down in the salt pits just under the Dead Sea. And so that's kind of our intro of that's what's happening, or just go read 2 Samuel 8 and you can get the whole backstory. Verse 1, David says, "O God, you have rejected us." Do you get kind of a feel of already kind of where he's at? "Oh God, you have rejected us, broken our defenses. You have been angry. Oh, restore us. You have made the land to quake. You have torn it open. Repair its breaches, for it totters. You have made your people see hard things. You have given us wine to drink that made us stagger." Wow. How do you meet this bad news? He starts right off, "Lord, here's how I feel." As he gets into this prayer, as he's crying out to God, let me just let you know right up front, here's what I'm going through, here's how I feel. You've rejected us, your kids, your people, in your land, and you're letting us down. Again, big battle going on. Obviously, battle's not going good at this point where he's crying out. He seems to, as we read the whole thing, it seems that he's writing this after it had taken place. But he's coming back to the beginning of how he felt during it, and he's walking through in poetic form. Here's what's going on. And just in these 3 verses right here, he starts off by saying, "Oh God," and then he uses the pronoun here, "you," 6 times. And so David rapid fires these pronouns as he traces all of the hard things right back to God. God, you did this, you did that. He's not blaming it on the enemy. He's not blaming it on anyone but God, which is both bad and good. It's a lot of times we want to blame everything on the enemy. On one hand, it could be in a positive thing of seeing the sovereignty of God, that he's involved in everything, when we're winning, when we're losing, and instead of putting it all, I think a lot of times as Christians, a lot of times we give the devil too much credit, when it was probably our flesh or so the world system or something else that we were fighting or whatever else, or God walking us through a trial. And we don't want to think it's God walking us through a trial. For some reason, we think it's better the devil's, and we're mad at him. And no. He doesn't place it on the back of his enemy. It's not on happenstance or some intermediate point in the chain of causation. No, but God. God's in control of all things. And so what's going on, God? Rejected. Have you ever felt rejected by God before? Yeah, it's a feeling that, if you're honest, that there's things that we go through where we feel, I think I'm doing all right, but why is this happening? If you've ever felt rejected by God, then you're in good company, because that's exactly where our friend David is right here. It's what he's going through. Let's be honest with each other and what we deal with in life and those difficult and hard times. Let's be transparent as David here. He's writing his poetry, and it gets published, and now you and I, we have it 3,000 years later and can still glean from it and learn from it and maybe teach us how to pray and to be honest with God in our prayers. Verse 2, it gives, and again, it's just his poetry is beautiful. And again, with whatever's going on in this battle, he likens it unto an earthquake. And so this imagery works with anything that we think is secure. It's like everything's getting all shaken up. God will shake down or split open whatever's not fit to stand. In verse 3, it's like being in a drunken state, where they're just kind of reeling and tottering back and forth from what they're going through in that part. It's just this inward confusion is what he writes out. And so, as we read something like that, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, is David drunk? That's not what it's saying. It's just a poetic form of we're tossed to and fro, and, it's just like getting sick on the high seas kind of thing. Is what is happening here. So that's I'll call it the negative side, or how to meet meet up with this bad news. And the rest of it then is kind of walking us through now how to find help in God. You and I, we're going to face bad news. What do we do? And he's going to start walking through that. I kind of wish it's short enough to be able to read it all through, but I don't have the words behind me. And so we'll just kind of take it kind of baby step by baby step and walk it through here. So how to find help in God is going to take us to the end of the chapter. And so what I'll do is I'll jump to our next verse in verse 4. David says, "You have set up a banner for those who fear you, that they may flee to it from the bow." A banner, simply a standard or a flag. Again, he's in a battle. They would have that. You would have the flag guy out in front or in the back, wherever he is, but he's holding that, and it's that reminder in the middle of the battle of who you're fighting for. And so in a sense, maybe picture Israel's flag, or better than that, God's flag, that you're reminded in the midst of the battle, in the heat of the battle, to run to him and under his banner. And so David shows confidence in God's future deliverance and notes that God has still provided a rallying point in the face of attack. The Lord is my banner, or Jehovah Nissi. When we went through the book of Exodus, we found it back there in Exodus chapter 17. This is a divine title, or even a divine name. Again, this banner is a military standard, a piece of cloth bearing an army insignia, a flag, an identity, or a security. We think of our identity being in Christ, then that's the flag that we go and hide under its shade. We go and cling to it. But again, this title goes all the way back to Exodus 17, and verses 8 through 16 kind of tells the story. But it's the story of Israel's first dealing with the Amalekites. Ultimately, God will still be dealing with them through David, and then through Saul, and then even here through David. But it's the story of Israel's dealing with the Amalekites. That was that story where there's Moses up on top of the mountain, Joshua down in the valley going to fight the battle. Moses is raising his hands. As long as he keeps his hands up, they're winning the battle. Aaron and Hur right next to him, they figure it out. So they prop him up, put him on a rock for his rear and holding up his arms there. And so they're winning that. And it goes all the way into the evening. But they win the battle. That was the Amalekites. Moses up on the mountain praying, Joshua fighting in the valley, God above both of them winning the war. Because ultimately it goes to him, Yahweh, our banner. That's the banner that we fly under. Today we would say, the Lord is my flag. I pledge my allegiance to him. Soldiers would always look to their flag. Again, it established their identity. It helps them to know who they are. On the battlefield, it also helps them to keep their bearings and give them courage and hope. And as long as their flag is still flying, they know the battle is not lost. Everyone has a banner. Everyone has a flag, something that they look to for identity and security. Now, some people will spend their whole lives chasing after it, trying to figure it out, finding it, without ever reaching a place of rest and trying this banner, trying that banner of the world, and run around looking for different ones and never running to Christ as our banner. And so what is your banner tonight? What is the emblem of your hope? Who do you look for courage in times of difficulty and despair? Who do you look for or look to? Moses had the best answer. He said, "The Lord is my banner." Not Jesus has a banner, but is my banner. And so we rally to him. Message Bible said it this way: "Then you planted a flag to rally your people, an unfurled flag to look to for courage." That was the Message Bible's interpretation of verse 4 there, the kind of way they laid it out. And so when we feel rejected by God, there are many times that we endure very hard times in our lives, and we feel that we're rejected by him. But it's during those times that we need to remember two things: to set up and rally under God's banner, and then secondly, flee to or run to his word of truth. We must be under his banner of truth. which reminds me in the Song of Solomon where it says, he brought me to the banqueting house and his banner over me was love. Back in the early 80s, we had a song about that we would sing at church. He brought me to the banqueting house and his banner over me was love, which is the very next verse. It's love that kind of brings us to this place. He says, your beloved ones. In verse 5, that your beloved ones may be delivered. Give salvation by your right hand, which always represents power. Give salvation by your right hand and answer us. And so again, salvation can be deliverance, probably deliverance from the enemy here rather than spiritual salvation. But he's saying that your beloved ones may be delivered. This is the language of love poetry right here. It appeals to the strongest of bonds, the most passionate of relationships. Oh, and P.S., David's name means beloved. That's what it means. Maybe it's him in the midst of the battle reminding himself, my name is David. My mom named me David. I'm beloved by mom and dad, but also the Lord himself, and we're his beloved. In his case, talking about the children of Israel. In our case, talking about those that are born again. And so with that, such beautiful language here. And we need to realize that even though there are problems and struggles and battles in life, God still loves us. Again, we're saying, why me? A lot of times in that sense. But even in that, I still love you. Even when he's chastising us, right? It's the reminder that I do love you, even in the time of discipline or spankings that are going on in our life. Good reminder by Paul in Romans chapter 8, 35, and then down in 37. Can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity or persecuted or hungry or destitute or in danger or threatened with death? And then in verse 37, no. Despite all these things, overwhelming victory is ours through Christ who loved us. What a great reminder. His love cannot change and will not fail. No matter how we feel, his love doesn't change. He doesn't even fall deeper in love with you. You might be offended at that. No, he can't love you anymore. He can't love you more tomorrow than he does today. Can't, because he already loves you at the top. That's fun to think about. Another verse on the very bottom there from the Song of Solomon, again, chapter 6, verse 3. I am my beloved's and my beloved's is mine. Remembering that relationship, husband and wife relationship, but in this case, us and God relationship. I think in the middle of our battles, what we can take from this is do the same thing that David did right here. That's what we're learning from him, right? This is his instructions. When everything's going wrong, bad in your life, here's some of the steps. Here's what I remember. Okay, he still loves me. He still loves me. He still loves me. And just reminding himself, and we need to do the same. Next, in verse 6 through 8, God steps in and he gets to speak now. And he says in verse 6, God has spoken in his holiness. Well, that's still David. God has spoken in his holiness, or in his holy place, or maybe even in his sanctuary. We're not positive about that word there. But then there's, with quotes here till the end of verse 8, it's God speaking. With exultation, I will divide up Shechem and portion out the vale, or the valley of Succoth. Gilead is mine. Manasseh is mine. Ephraim is my helmet. Judah is my scepter. Moab is my wash basin, obviously in the negative. Upon Edom, I cast my shoe, another negative. Over Philistia, I shout in triumph, or over, in triumph over them, is what it's saying there. You listen to God's sovereignty over these nations with the word I and me and my. He's owning all of this. The ones that are his, specifically, the tribes of Israel there, and those that are not, they're all. He's sovereign over every nation. These are just all the surrounding ones at that time period and what he's showing us there. Let me put a map up behind us. As he names this, I think it makes just a little bit more sense to kind of put it on our map behind us here. And so kind of that brownish, I don't even know what color to call it, sand color, is the Judah in Israel, Judah being the south there. And so what he's been dealing with is Aram or Assyria up at the top, okay? And there's the two kings that are coming down through that. That's where most of the battle has been fought. But now Moab and Edom all of a sudden come from the other direction. Dangerous. All of a sudden you're getting hit on both sides, and that seems to be where the complaints are coming out, or that, God, what are you doing here? We're at this battle, you've led us this way, we're doing good and all of that, now we're getting attacked from the rear. What do we do here? And so with that, kind of what he's laying out is, in the land of Israel here, you see the two little light blues there, the little Sea of Galilee at the top and the Dead Sea down here, and the little line that connects them is the River Jordan, okay? And so that separates out the country there. Today, everything to the right of the Jordan is the country Jordan, and everything on the left side is Israel there. And so with that, as they're battling there, and these guys are coming out here, he lays out Gilead, again, one of his tribes. Succoth is a city there. And that's on the east side, to the right side of the Jordan River there. Manasseh straddled the River Jordan, so had people on both sides of that. Ephraim and Judah were the principal tribes of the west, and that's where Shechem was also. Ephraim and Judah were, God called him his helmet and his scepter. So out of the 12 tribes, those two were the chief agents of defense and rule. And so that's why he just kind of gives that, again, poetic wording to that there. And so he's basically saying north, south, east, and west is kind of what he's covering in this sense. But he gets to those that are against him. Moab is my wash basin. You know what comes to my mind when I think of that? I have this, it was an old spaghetti pot Kelly and I had when we were first married, and it just got beaten to a pulp. So it got out in the garage, and now I use it if I'm scrubbing floors, and I don't even have to clean it. It just stays dirty. And so when I think of Moab as my wash basin, that's just the picture that comes to my mind. Maybe another reason is because it's down by the Dead Sea and everything to the very bottom. They call them the salt flats down there, and you can't grow anything, and it's just terrible. It's the Badlands, it's just an ugly area out there. And part of the reasons for that, you remember Moab, and do you see above it Ammon? Do you see where Ammon? And where those two names came from was, remember Lot and his wife and their two daughters, okay? And then she turns around. Let me try it again. Lot's wife turns around. She turns into a pillar of salt. And so it's later that week where one of Lot's, I keep saying salt because I'm thinking of salt. One of Lot's daughters, she gets this great idea. Let's get dad drunk and I'll let him get me pregnant. And so that works. And then the next night, he tells the other sister to do the same. And so there's this weird, incestuous relationship that takes place. Well, both of those girls, it ends up, dad figures out what happens. And anyways, they both have a boy. And one is called Moab, and the other was called Ammon. So that's where they come from, and they became enemies of Israel from their birth. It was just a bad thing from the beginning, and always was a bad thing. And so, again, it's just, God doesn't just out of the blue say, I don't like that country, and I'm going to call them a wash basin. No, there's reason behind this and history behind these kind of things. Upon Edom, I cast my shoe. The picture seems to be kind of a man returning home and flinging his shoes to his slave or just chucking him in the corner. It's just kind of a discarded item for the time, and that's how he's picturing Edom here. Edom is a humbled servant. When you think of Edom, you think of two things. Esau, that's where the name came from. And so Esau, who didn't want anything, he didn't want to follow the Lord. And so he's from that area. And then the whole Herod isn't a person, is actually a group of different a family, and so they were Edomites, and that's where they came from. The other one that he names is Philistia, which is the Philistines, and really both Saul and David gained their great battle reputations from defending Israel from the Philistines. In my intro, I said, about the time one problem is solved, another one begins. And again, that's why I put the arrows on there, is you're thinking you're doing pretty good and the battle's almost over and we're doing all right, and then all of a sudden it gets flanked from the other side. David and Joab, they're fighting the two enemies up north, and then all of a sudden they're receiving aid with this strategic flanking of allies in the south. Moab and Edom are helping out Syria at this time. God, which is David's commander-in-chief, is basically saying, wherever you go in Israel, it all belongs to me. I own the land, so stop worrying. I oversee my people, and I oversee all of these people over here also. When you hear God talk like that, you don't have to be afraid. And that's what 6 through 8 is all about. David, relax. I got this. I have it all under control. These are my nations. They do what I tell them to do. I am sovereign over them. And again, it's David hearing that, but it's you and I reading our Bibles, reading through things, and whether it's a promise, whether it's a rebuke, whatever it is taking these things to heart and realizing who God is. It's a good reminder of that. Next, in verse 9 and 10, we have the calculated concerns. So David goes back to asking questions. Who will bring me to the fortified city? Who will lead me to Edom? Have you not rejected us, O God? You do not go forth, O God, with our armies. It's really, if you don't, who else? Well, Syria, they're relying on these other powers of the day and these allies, and that's all coming together for them. But every time Saul tried that and getting different allies to help him out, God would just let him fail every time and say, no, you're supposed to be looking to me, not going and get the Egyptians to come up and help you. Don't look to man, look to me. And so after God speaks in verse 6 through 8, David asks for help in the battle. God cannot cast off forever, and yet we sense being cast off temporarily. It is a true feeling that you feel, but it's not happening. He's not going to cast you off. You're his kids. And so with that, it's not happening, but just as David felt it, we say the same thing. I don't think God's listening to me. I've been praying about this situation. I'm not hearing anything. It's just crickets. And so I don't think he's listening to me, or I don't think this, or I don't think he likes me, or because this happened in my past, or we come up with a ton of different reasons why, but we have that feeling, we have that sense. Why does he allow us to feel this way? Why does he allow us to go through this? I think sometimes it's to show us hard things, to make us strong, mature us, wake us up. Sometimes to allow us to reap what we've sown. Sometimes so we'd cry out for restoration, and then he can give us the victory, and then we know it's him and not our might. So we're given the praise in the right direction. That we're glorifying him rather than our accolades, Well, we start moving from this place where the enemy is no longer the invader, but the one to be invaded, where we move for the last section of verse 11 and 12, where this prayer for help. And so it's been a tough song so far, but man, it ends awesome in verse 11 and 12 here. And so he says in verse 11, "Oh, grant us help." You can hear his prayer. "Oh, grant us help against the foe. For vain is the salvation of man." It's like, it's not, Lord, send us Egypt or send us, the Ammonites to be on our side to fight against these groups or anything else. No way. For vain is the salvation of men. I'm not going to turn to them. Verse 12, this is awesome. "With God we shall do valiantly." If you're going to highlight anything, highlight that right there. With God we shall do valiantly. It is he who will tread down our foes. If we have any victory of any battle, he's going to get the credit. And let's remember that. And so in our ESV, with God we shall do valiantly. In the New King James, through God we shall do valiantly. So finally, this prayer turns into this affirmation and this lonely venture into a partnership again. It's beautiful. He's confident that with God, they will be victorious. He lands again on his feet. He lands again, maybe on his knees, I should say, back to the right place to be able to be connected and in a partnership with God again. And not, woe is me, we're all alone in the middle of the desert. We also see our part, the valiant deeds, but God's part, there will be his hands upon our hand. Here's how he wraps up verse 12. As David's fighting, we have God's hand on his hand, and we have his foot on the enemy's neck. And that's a terminology that's used throughout the whole Old Testament in that way, but that's kind of the picture of, I'm going to be holding your hand. It would be like a surgeon with his or her scalpel, or it would be like with these guys in their fighting hands, their sword hands, and doing that. God's hand on your hand, but his foot on the enemy's neck. On whose strength do you rely on? Only God can give the victory in your situation, at home, at work, at school, in your neighborhood. We cannot find the victory in ourselves. We cannot be true successes without God's help. We have no hope unless God is willing to act on our behalf. I don't know why I did this, but I don't know why I thought this, but I summed up this psalm in emojis. And sometimes I do things to help me kind of memorize it or just kind of sum it up in outline kind of form and that. But he starts off with this frown, right? It's really, really bad. That's how we got our first 3 verses. It's all bad. There's no hope yet or anything else. It's just bad. And then to the flag. But there's a flag to run to, and he's remembering that, of running to God's flag. And then in verse 5 was the heart. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm beloved. I'm one of his sons. Oh, that's right. That's what my name means, right? David's walking us through that. And then there's flags, plural, verse 6 through 8, that God is sovereign over all the nations. It reminds us of that. And then verse 9, oh, wait a minute, but back to the concerns that I have. God, will you go with us? And if you don't go with us, who's going to go with us? And all those concerns, and wraps it up to that prayer of hope, prayer for help. I won't rely on blank, whether it's myself or my strength or my wit or my wisdom or any of these things, but God, he'll do it. And so those are my Psalm 60 in emojis right there. I'm done. I ran out of notes. I was thinking as I went through this, you start digging in. I love geography and looking at the maps and doing all the thing. I have to kind of get it in my head that way, but you can get so much in the minutia. But to pull back out, it's just like, this psalm is for you and I today. It really is. We have battles. They look different than David's today. We have those battles, but we're going to run to his banner. We're going to run to him and see what he's going to do. And then that way we get to fully 100% give him the glory, the victory. Not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but to thy name is the glory. And that's where we get it back to him. Amen. Father, we pray that you would help us in incorporating that into our prayer life. God, that we would not only learn, as this psalm said, it was for instruction. It is. But God, that you would also help it to be in our memory, to be able to pull that up. That maybe we're not going through any big battle right now, but Lord, when we do, that'd be able to pull that back up and remember those simple truths to be able to run back to and just refresh our minds and refresh our hearts and refresh our souls of exactly what we need to do, to be reminded of who you are and what you do. Lord, we trust in you, your wisdom, your sovereignty, and every ounce of our lives. Thank you for your help in each of these cases in our lives. Thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.